Hi, how's it going? My name is Alua Shaun Babalola, but you can call me Shaun for short. I'm a director and producer that's based in New York City. I have a production company called Do Global Productions that focuses on African content and content from the African diaspora. And so I work primarily in television. Actually, I work pretty evenly in television and film. So I created a documentary series that was a web series that I filmed in Nigeria and Sierra Leone, Kenya, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Botswana, and Spain. And from there, I started working kind of more in film in terms of just documentaries, feature documentaries. Um, the last one I did was about women in STEM, and then I worked for CNN, and then a couple other networks. And so now I'm making a feature fully remote, which is the first time I'm doing this fully remote because of COVID, and I'm doing that for HBO. And so I love making things about identity. So I'm born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. That's like in my blood. But my mother was born and raised in Sierra Leone, and my father was born and raised in Nigeria. So I'm very much like one foot in both, one foot in each continent, so to speak. So I was very interested in like how we're perceived as people depending on where we are. So a lot of my work has to do with identity and has to do with culture and preservation and things like that. So I was gonna do a presentation, but I saw that there was a lot of questions. So I'm just gonna answer them. And it could be a discussion. Like if you have something that you want me to clarify, like raise your hand. I think there's like a raise hand thing in Zoom, or you can put it in the chat and I'll answer it. And it could just be like a back and forth because I think that's a lot more helpful than just like me talking at you. So let me find where I put the questions. Okay, here it is. So the first one was, how did you start traveling professionally and how did you fund your travel films? So that's a really good question. And I think people are not real about how to get started. So I think it's important for you to know that in television and film, there's really no one way to begin your career. The way I did it is that I started off as an editor, and then from an editor, I was just like working in a post house. And then a friend was like, "Hey, you have a camera, you know how to shoot. Why don't you help me shoot my feature documentary?" So I was doing that while I was editing. And then I was just like, well, I actually want to go into production. So I was trying to go into production. I saved all my money from being an editor. And then I quit my job as an editor and I was like, I'm going to get a production job. So a friend randomly out of the blue was like, hey, I want to go to, I have a project that's in Haiti. I can't go. Can you do it? So I went to Haiti for 3 weeks to film a documentary about their healthcare system. And after that, after I got back, I was like, yes, I'm ready to go. And then I couldn't find a job for like a year. So then, but thankfully I had that cushion, right? Because I saved up all my money. So what I did was is that I just started working my way up again. And I would just take jobs. I was working in equipment houses. I was working like film equipment houses. I was working doing these like odd jobs. And what's important though is when you're pursuing these things, make sure you're still creating your own work in some sort of capacity because you never know where there's going to be a moment where you're working somewhere and someone is just like, well, actually, you seem really talented. Let me see your stuff. And then if you have it, then you have it ready. Like stay ready so you don't have to get ready. But also go, build relationships. There's a lot of people want to network up, but you really, I think Issa Rae was like, you should network across. It's really true. You should collaborate with a lot of people that are around you because that's so many resources right there. If you know someone who knows how to edit, if you know someone who knows how to shoot, if you know someone who does Photoshop, it's really, really helpful. And yeah, so when I finally did get a job working as a director and producer, it was not the area I wanted to be in. It was documentary, but it was more like corporate. So I'm very strategic. So I was like, okay, I have this idea that I want to film in Nigeria. So one day I just took up my camera. I took the money that I saved. I took a some vacation off of work and I just went and I shot the documentary. And so from there it kind of like steamrolled. Um, and yeah, so that's how I got started. And funding, when it comes to funding, so it depends. Networks, they fund, they have the money, they fund it themselves. Films, a lot of films are grants. And if you're making documentary films, you would need to get very well acquainted with the grant systems and just what's out there and how you need to start explaining your story, explaining your craft, and explaining how you want your film to be presented so that people can just like give you the money for it. Because I think that's a very important aspect of filmmaking that people don't understand as a part of it, the business and presentation part of it. Um, so the next one, what is the most important? Actually, before I jump into the next one, is there any questions about that? I'm gonna look at the chat. Thanks. Yeah, I can put my work, like I'll put the website afterwards so I don't get too distracted. How long does it usually take you to edit a full documentary? I'll get to that later when we start talking about the creative aspect of it. So I'll answer this first. What is the most important thing to remember when making a film about identity and culture? Okay. Um, I would say the most important thing is ask yourself why you're making it. If you're making it just because it seems cool, that's not a good enough reason. Sorry to disappoint you. I think um, you need, if you're not of the culture that you're trying to document, you need to find someone who is, because that there's going to be so many blind spots that you have if you're not a part of that culture, that it's not going to have the same integrity, and it's not going to be, it's going to be pretty one-sided and from an outsider's view. And I think what's really important in making a documentary about culture and identity is using the voice of the people that you're trying to document. You don't speak over people. You can point the camera, you can have the artistic vision, you can, have the creative, you know, way of how you want to do it. But in terms of what's being said, make sure to check yourself and keep saying, okay, is this my opinion or is this the actual opinion of the people that I'm documenting and that I'm seeing? Because that's really important. That's probably the most important. The integrity of just being true of what you're capturing and not trying to, I think every documentary has an agenda. There's no like flat, unless you're doing like journalistic things like news and stuff. If you're doing just like a character profile or something about a culture, you have an agenda when you're doing it. So figure out what that agenda is and if it's actually an honest one, I would say. How do you come up with ideas? So for me, just, what motivates me are things that I want to change. If I see something that a story that gets me just incredibly upset, or it's something that I know that's like, let's say, of my culture that I want to showcase because I think it's, important to, and it'll reach a lot of people, or if it's some sort of topic that doesn't get to seem a lot of doesn't seem to get, I guess, a lot of attention. That's where I'm just like, okay, am I the right person to do this? First of all, is there someone else who could do this better than me? Because I'm not going to be able to tell every single story. But if I am the right person to do it, how can I tell it? How can I tell it in a really different, interesting way? How do you find motivation in editing? There, I think when you're editing a documentary, that motivation is going to go in and out. And it's like I've edited features and I've edited my own stuff before. And there are days where I'm just like, I don't even want to touch it. I don't want to look at it because this is just too much. I'm gonna, like, I don't know. take a walk in the park, watch some TV, and then come back to it 2 days later. Because if you just keep trying to pound it out and like you're gonna miss things, you're gonna get really frustrated. So that editing is gonna come in, that motivation is gonna come and go. And I think that's just the nature of it. While documentary, have you ever had to stop filming because you weren't allowed but kept filming it? Oh my gosh, that's all the time when I'm in when I'm in Nigeria. Usually, um, so I'm trying to figure out if I should actually say this or not. So there have been ways that there have been moments where I wasn't supposed to be filming, but I didn't care because I knew I could get away with it. But you have to gauge that. You have to know the environment you're in, and you have to gauge that because I don't want you to jump into danger just because you know you can get away with it. I knew what I could and couldn't do when I was in like Nigeria, so to say. So, um, like I knew when it wasn't going to be a big deal, and I knew when it was going to be a big deal, and so that was like my gauge. So if someone random was going to tell me to stop filming, I could know like okay, that person actually doesn't matter, so I'm just going to keep going. So don't make that decision unless you know like the in and outs of the environment that you're in. And if it's and also make sure it's worth the trouble that you might get into, because don't get into trouble and then you get like footage that you're not even going to use. Um, how do you keep the positivity and perseverance when things don't go your way during production? The mentality I have when filming is just it is what it is. Um, it's real life. You're not there's so little you can control. So I think the best skill you can pick up being a documentary filmmaker is learning how to pivot. If the weather is bad, figure out what you can shoot inside that you were planning to shoot in another day. If one of your subjects or characters drop out, figure out how can you replace them somehow or how you can still tell their story without them being involved but maybe get their permission. um, just knowing just knowing that things will go wrong. That's just the bottom line. Things will always go wrong. I was in Botswana and I had someone filming with me, and we did a whole day of interviews. And then I checked at the end of the day, and she didn't record any audio for it. And so, after kind of like flipping over my desk, I had to figure out okay, what are we going to do about this? And eventually I just had to re-record the interviews we did. There was no way about it. I needed it and I just needed to redo it. So I think it's just like learning how to work on your feet and just like being ready to just go because things will go wrong. Just be prepared, as prepared as possible, and know that it's not the end of the world. Because sometimes when you lose something, you get something even better afterwards. Um, yes, you can get email after this. What are the cons when it comes to documentary? I think I don't know if it's necessarily a con, but it's hard to plan a documentary when you don't know how it's going to end. Because again, it's real life. So you can go into it guessing and being like, I think I want to end the movie this way. But I've been in situations where we were going to interview someone and the person died. Or, um, you know, it just, I think that's the con of it. You're kind of just like drifting while you're making the entire thing. So it takes a certain personality to do documentary because you have to know, okay, within this structure, anything can happen. And I'm just gonna have to figure out what I'm gonna do with it. Um, I would say that's probably the biggest con that you have no control over what you're doing, as opposed to a narrative where you know scene by scene, you know exactly written out how it's going to begin and how it's going to end. So someone said that they're very interested in different cultures, and the last thing they want to do is be ignorant and offensive. So what's the best way to research the customs? Um, yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to to not be offensive. You can research. I do a lot of preliminary research before going anywhere. meaning like reading books, looking at other documentaries that might be similar, um, just looking at interviews, reading Wikipedia about the country, looking at the country's history, looking at what's happened. Um, and then what I try to do, which is not always possible to do, I try to just kind of go on my own without filming and just like see for myself because I'm a very perceptive person. And once I'm in the environment, I can be like, oh, okay, so this is how the society works. But then this also goes back to my initial point where I was just like, make sure you have someone from that culture who can do this with you because they can be your best guide and they will see things that you will not see and they probably won't steer you wrong. What if it is a part of your culture, but you don't fully know about it? Yeah, that happens too. When I was in, a lot of the time, if I'm in Sierra Leone or Nigeria, which is part of my culture, I don't speak the languages. I can understand a lot of it, but in terms of it speaking, my American accent, they're like, what? What are you talking about? So um, I think even then, I'm just I have the luxury of having some family that live there. So I'm like, actually, how do you get there? Should I drive? Should I hire someone? Or just asking people like, hey, I know I'm American. So that's key. Know your privileges and know how you present. Because when I go to certain countries, I'm like, regardless of if this is my culture, I present as very American. And so with that presentation is going to come with people treating me a certain way, talking to me a certain way. Um, Depending on the culture, me being a woman is a thing. So I have to know, okay, what are my privileges with this? What is like kind of a deterrent or unfortunate like con of this? And how can I maneuver it? Um, because let's say in certain places I'm not going to be able to walk into because it's male only, or um, this area that I'm going to is very rural and I don't speak the language at all. So even though they can see that I'm Nigerian, so to say, there I can't speak Yoruba, so I'm not going to know what anyone is saying. So I would say also as well, it's just always really important to just have someone involved with you that's just more in tune with the culture that you're trying to um, depict or film. Um, what are the steps to writing and filming a documentary? So when you say writing, I don't know if the person who asked this is in the chat, but when you say writing, do you mean like the outline in terms of editing, or you're just like writing the treatment for what you're trying to film? If you're not in the chat and you didn't ask that, then that's fine. I'll just try and answer anyway. Okay. Um, so writing, it's hard. Writing achievement is one of the worst. I hate doing it. It's like, so I would say, what is it that you're trying to say? First of all, I like to outline a lot of things. What is it that you're trying to say? Who is it that you're trying to, show who or what? And then who are the key players in this um, environment or this, society or social group? And then from there, I try and say, okay, if these are the who, what, why, when, and where, how am I going to approach this story? Am I going to intro this? Am I going to talk to this person first and they're going to set up the history? And then I'm going to go to this person and then they're going to talk about modern times. Like this, that's how I try and think about it, to think about how the story will actually play out in the end, and try to talk to people who will provide different perspectives and aspects to the topic that I'm trying to cover. And that's kind of how I outline and write it out. I don't really write everything we're going to see because I don't know what we're going to see. So it's very hard to write everything out. And then in terms of filming it with that outline, so I just reach out to these people. Sometimes it's the chase, um, and then try and plan it from there. It's always just one step at a time. It's really hard with documentaries to just kind of like jump and leap ahead because there's so many elements. You have the time of the year, maybe that time of the year when you're going somewhere. Um, it's rainy season and you can't film or something like that. So you really have to, there's a lot of development and pre-production that'll have to go into a film so that you know that you at least are prepared for the most part for it. And do you think intuitiveness, oh, what documentary are you most proud of? Um, I can think of two right now. Well, so the documentary series I created, I'm very, very, very proud of because that I had so many people on the team that were like, "Oh, yes, we're ready to do this to you," and then they all kind of dropped out because it was a passion project of mine, and so I ended up going to like 10 countries with my camera and just interviewing all these people and actually just doing it within like a 2 to 3 year span, and it came out pretty well. There were some frustrations, but I'm proud of that. And then most recently, um, there's an episode I did for the show United Shades of America with W. Kamau Bell, um, and it was about farming in Oklahoma. And that was, I'm really proud of that episode because it was just out of my element. I don't know anything about Oklahoma. It was the first time I was in Oklahoma, but somehow being able to properly depict the lives of these like three different farmers in the state and why they're important to our food in America. I was really proud of how that came out. And that was a lot of relationship building too during pre-production and just like letting the families trust you because I think a lot of people in that area are kind of suspicious of just like, oh, you just want to make fun of us and call us hicks and things like that. So it took a lot of trust to be like, no, we actually want to do your story justice. So I'm really proud of that. Yeah, it was really interesting to work on that show. The other episode I did was in Skid Row, houselessness in Skid Row, and that was a lot. I think I have like PTSD from that episode, just because it was just so much, and there was a drive-by shooting while we were shooting. There was just so much going on, and it was like 100 degrees, and we were there for 8 days, and it was just like a lot. But I'm really proud of that episode too. So it was great. It was a great season. Um, do you think? And I saw the thumbs up, Beckett. Thank you. Do you think intuitiveness is a major part of being able to really connect with? Yes, absolutely. I think anybody can make a documentary. I really think anybody can make it, but what makes a great documentary is the skill that the filmmaker has to connect with these people and actually show their truth and you know have them trust you, be able to show their truth in a very honest way and to present it in a very um, compact delivery for an audience who knows nothing about it. That's not very easy to do. And there's so much you need to know about, like, okay, maybe I was pursuing this, but this doesn't seem like it's panning out, but this seems more interesting. You have to be able to know that. You be like, okay, maybe this will serve the story better than this person who might be, because there's so many people who will want to be a part of something, maybe, and they might be making something up or because that's why you always have to fact check and like figure it out, or they might be playing something up, especially in certain countries where they think where there's not that much opportunity for work or um, just the spotlight. People will play up their importance or play up their how connected they are to certain things. So you have to be able to suss out who's like faking the funk and who's like real and who's actually um, be a good person to speak to. How are you able to earn the trust of the people you're documenting? I just lay it out for them, honestly. I don't think there's any trick. I'm a very honest person. So I'm like, hey, this is what I want to do for the documentary. I want to show you because of this, this, and that. Integrity is my like utmost important thing that I go for. Do you want to be a part of it? You're not, you don't have to. That's just how I present it because, and either they do or they don't. Um, yeah, just very straightforward in that sense. And then over time, it's up to them to be like, okay, I trust this person because she's shown me that she is trustworthy. Yes, documentary can be really sad and beautiful. And it's so it's so enlightening because you're able to put yourself in situations that you normally would have never been in. But at the same time, you kind of feel, at least for me, sometimes when I'm in certain environments, I feel very limited in how I can help people because I'm just like, I'm showing this story, and I know in the end, this will probably help you get what you need. But right now, I'm sitting in your tent and I can't really help you that much. I can help you buy a meal, but that's about it. I don't have millions. I can't buy you a house. So, that's that. But I think that's just the reality of life. Do you ever get emotionally attached to a documentary and have a hard time ending it? I think I'm usually too stressed out from doing documentaries to be emotionally attached. No, but I do get emotionally attached um, with some of the people just because you do build that relationship over so like let's say United Shades that was like over 6 weeks of pre-production. So, you're calling these people every day and you're like, hey, what's up? How are you doing today? Are you still into doing this or just talking to them? So you end up building a friendship. And some people I still speak to, some people I don't. Um, the I One documentary I did was of a death metal band in Botswana, and I still talk to them. I still, the lead singer of Vulture Thrust, I still like text him time to time, and he texts me, and it's just, yeah, it's nice when you can keep the relationship, but it's sometimes it just doesn't happen, and that's fine too. So, but I never really have a hard time ending it. No. Have you ever met? Yeah, I have. He is a very large part of the show. So as a producer, when you're a producer on the show, we kind of come up with there's like a framework of the ideas of the episode that you're doing, but you come up with kind of the topics and the themes and the people you want to interview, and you bring it to him and be like, "What do you think about this?" And he's like, "Eh," or "That seems cool." Um, and we have meetings. He's a very cool guy. He's very like um I love people who are very aware, and he's a very just like perceptive aware person. He has an incredible skill of just like um very quickly understanding people, and that comes to like people he's working with, and also maybe just like when he just meets a person on set that we ask him that, because we don't tell him, we tell him kind of like more or less who the people he's meeting, but he likes to go in pretty fresh so he can learn more about them. And like the way he can connect to people is such a skill that so many people don't have. It's like he's very talented in that regard. Really nice person. um for some reason I thought producing the one who invests money. So it depends on what type of producer you are. I'll read out the question. For some reason, I thought producers are the ones who invest money into the project. What else do producers do? So there's a creative producer, there are field producers, there are executive producers, there are line producers. I'm quite often a creative and field producer. Um, so creative producer or story producer, sometimes they're interchangeable, sometimes they're not. Are usually people who will craft the story. They will find the people. They will come up with the themes. They will just, find what's going to be featured in the episode. So I do a lot of that. But then I'm also often a field producer. So a field producer is pretty much running the set when we're filming. So I'm paying attention to what the director needs. Producers often very work very closely with the director. So if I'm not directing something, I'm producing it. When I'm producing, I'm working with the director very closely, and so I'm figuring out what they want. I'm making sure, making sure time is being kept because overtime is costly. making sure we're getting to the locations properly. It really depends on the project. Um, Sometimes there's a production manager who takes on some of the producing logistics, but otherwise, I would be making sure people have lunch. Um, so doing all of the field stuff, kind of running the set as well as the creative. Um, the money people, yeah, executive producers are often the money people. Sometimes they're not even, should I be saying this? I'll say it. Sometimes they're not even involved with it so closely. They kind of just like stamp their name on it, give the money, and then they're executive producer. Um, so yeah, they can be that, or they can just be the person who is they have the last say in the entire thing. So they'll see it, but they'll be like, actually, I don't want it to go this way. This is how I want the end of the episode to be. So they kind of have the overall like yes power. Do you think of an idea from seeing it from a distance, or about something through a friend, reading something about it, or think of it post experience? Go through something personally, see something up close, or have a personal connection to it? Both, very much both. A lot of the things I direct is something very personal. So I direct, again, like identity, things that have to do with Black women, things that have to do with Africans. Um, it's usually things that happen around me or to me. Um, and then when I'm working for a lot of the time, working for television, it's things that I have read or read something about. Um, and then we just, if it seems like it would make a good episode, then we go pursue it. So I'll get to the next question. How do you include interviews and information in a way that remains dynamic for the viewer? I think that's up to you as a filmmaker. Uh, there's so many ways to tell a story. Who said that? I don't remember who said the quote, but content dictates form. So you don't always have to tell the story in the same way. Depending on what it is you're trying to show, you can use reenactments, you can use interviews, you can use animation, you can use whatever. I think it's really up to you how to keep something dynamic. But I think whoever you choose to point a camera at, make sure they're engaging. Make sure, like, when you talk to them and when you see them, you can be like, actually, I would watch this person for 40 minutes or for an hour or for an hour and a half. I think that's really key because if you have someone who's like really dry and can't like hold your attention for 2 minutes, they're probably not the best person to interview unless they have something really incredible to offer, incredible insight. And then you just kind of edit around it to make them more interesting. Um, what are some filmmakers who you idolize or take inspiration from? Oh gosh. So I'm gonna tell you one thing. I am really awful with remembering names of people. So there's so many filmmakers that I love, and I'm like, oh, who's that guy? So it's not because I don't know, it's just because I just really don't remember names of people. But there are there are certain people that are I think are just doing whatever they want. Thank you, Cyan or Zian. I hope I didn't pronounce your name wrong, but I probably did. But yeah, um, like Terrence Nance, I really like. He did a simplification of her beauty, an oversimplification of her beauty, and then that HBO show. You see, forgetting the name already. Hold on. There we go. Random Acts of Flyness on HBO. I don't know if you've ever seen that. That was an incredible show. Um, So there's a lot of like new and upcoming, like, well, not even new because they've been around, but I think they're just like getting known now. But I love like Numa Perrier. Um, she did this movie called Jezebel. But in terms of inspiration, funny enough, I get a lot of inspiration from music videos. Growing up, I watched music videos a lot, and they were not the same music videos that are out now. They had story, and they were like, they somehow made these short films in like 5 minutes. And I was just always very interested in how they were able to do that in a very like impactful way. even if you just watch something like, and they were events too. I'm aging myself, but like I remember when Michael Jackson's Remember the Time premiered after The Simpsons, and that was like an event, that short film. And so music videos were like that. And so I think that was like some of my first inspiration where I was just like, okay, yeah, this is really cool. There's I remember there's one specific video that was just like, wow. And if you it's probably on YouTube, Radiohead's Just. I really like Radiohead's Just. And I think that was like one of the thank you, Beck. I am aging myself. um, and that was just like, okay, filmmaking is really cool. So yeah, that's a big inspiration. So my favorite documentary. Oh man, you know what's a really incredible documentary? There's so many, but I think in terms of editing and the twists and the turns, if you can watch Dear Zachary, Dear Zachary is a really, really good documentary about um, a guy he kind of made it for his best friend and who died. But the way that story just unfolds, the way they tell it and the way it ends, it's just like, and then you'll probably be like bawling at the end of it. It's just really good. So I would just say, off the top of my head, Dear Zachary is a really good one to watch in terms of storytelling. So it's one of my favorites. Um, you're welcome, Lulu. Um, and let me see the next one. How do you actually, I'm kind of running out of time, so I'm gonna probably skip towards there's because I know you guys are going to, you're in beginning stages of research for your documentaries. And so the next steps are the plans for who and how to interview in the COVID era. So that's really interesting because I'm doing that for the first time now, obviously, because we didn't experience COVID before. And it's it's really bizarre, if I'm going to be honest. Uh, so what we've been doing is when we do want to go on set, I know there's probably no budgets for this and you have to do distancing. So I would say for you, I'll tell you what we do and then I'll tell you what you could probably do for yours. So what we've been doing is if we have to be inside, everyone is getting COVID tests 3 days before. We are remaining masked at all times. The talent is getting a COVID test and having personal cars. And we are bringing our own lunches. We're eating them distance. And the space has to be like a large enough space where we're all distant. And that's with if we're on set. If we cannot be on set, what we've done is, I don't know if you guys know about like the Interatron. We've kind of set up like this um, type of thing where um, it's the camera, and then there's like a video zoom of the director's face or my face, and then there's a mirror that reflects it, so that the person being interviewed can look straight ahead into the mirror, but they're looking at my face, so it's like an interview. But then the camera can see through the mirror, so the camera is shooting straight ahead. And so that's what we've been doing for the virtual interviews. It's kind of, we did it, I did it for the first time on Saturday, and it worked. It worked very well. But one thing that I think was missing was just that human connection of being on set with someone and making them feel comfortable, making them feel connected, and things like that. So if you guys want to be and if you can swing it, I would say if you have to interview someone, interview them outside or close to outside as you can, masked with like a crew of like 4 people. So that you can stay because nobody was near each other when we were filming too. Like we were all back. The only person that was close by was the talent, the camera person, and then like maybe the director. So you can do it that way and just stay as far as apart as possible. And if you can't swing that, try and do it. through Zoom. I know the quality isn't good, so what you could probably do is if the person has a camera or if they have a recent iPhone, I don't know who you're interviewing, you can ask them to maybe set it up in a way where you give them direction of how to set it up and maybe set it up on the eye line of your laptop and then do the interview through Zoom that way. So you're filming it and then just ask them for the footage afterwards. That's probably how I would do it honestly. Because if you don't have the budget to send, what other people have been doing is they've been sending care packages, like equipment care packages with cameras, lighting, and sound, very, very small packages to people so that they can set it up. The director can call them and be like, okay, this is how I want you to set up the shot. And then they'll conduct the interview via Zoom, but then they'll be recording on the actual camera and then send it back with all the footage. Um, but yeah, I think those are just the ways to do it for now. And is the interview specifically the people on camera wearing masks? No, the people on camera are not wearing masks, which is why it was really important for them to get tested. And because I think that, yeah, I don't think it aesthetically would be pleasing for them to be wearing masks on. But that's also a reason why we were just all distanced because we had masks at all times. And then the only person who did not have a mask is the talent who was filming, basically. Um, yeah, a lot of YouTubers have taken that approach. There's just it's I think you kind of just have to work with what you got right now. So if someone has a recent phone, help them do that setup through Zoom or do it close to outside where there's a lot of circulation. Because I've heard of sets where people are just like not distancing. And to be honest, on a set with 12 or so people, even though we were all tested, even though we were all distanced, and even though we were all masked, it was almost like impossible to not cross paths at some point and like touch a case that someone touched, move something aside. It's just the nature of being on a set. Things get touched. And so I was just like, we were all just excessively washing our hands. So it's like, imagine if we weren't tested and then all that stuff was happening. So I would just say, try to have like a table of just like Clorox and hand sanitizer, and then like keep it kind of distance if you're going to be in person, have everyone masked at all times, and do it that way and keep like a really, really small crew, as small as you can. And I guess one of the last questions. Well, I can do this quickly. So, do you suggest having students transcribe the interviews? Yes, absolutely, and it's really helpful for editing. Um, yeah, have it transcribed, and you can do it without it, but it just makes it so much easier for you because it also comes with timestamps, so you know where things are. And how do you help students think about a variety of shots or gaining access to interesting ideas for filming? So just ask. So there are so many rude people in this world that if you're just friendly and treat someone like a human being and just ask nicely, more times than not, people will be like, okay. But I think when they're just some people like, why can I use this space? Why is this? I've always gotten close to what I wanted if it was available and or like ended up not being available or just what I wanted by calling someone up and being like, hey, this is what I'm doing. I appreciate what can I do to offer you so that I can use this space or I can use this location. I know this is your property. I respect your property. How can we make this happen? More times than not, people will be like, yeah, sure. You seem chill. Let's do it. Yeah, it's when you start like demanding things and people start feeling like they're being like scammed where that becomes a problem. So were there any more questions? I hope this was insightful or helpful. Cool. Um, yeah, well, I mean, I want to see all of your movies. I'm gonna type in, um, you can email me at any time. Oops, at that email. And then I'm going to give you two websites. Please don't judge my websites. Yeah, so, and yeah, reach out if you have any more questions or if you want to send me your films and stuff. I want to see them. I just really like, you know, seeing other filmmakers do things because I think we need more storytellers out there from different backgrounds and perspectives and things like that. And that's it.
That was awesome. Thank you, Sean. And thank you all the students. Great questions. I know as a teacher myself, I learned a lot as well. And I see some teachers on there that I'm sure we're really getting a lot out of this as well. So this has been really wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day.